This is so fun to welcome our next author spotlight guest. This is Dr. Alaina Puff. She is one of the contributing authors on the new book, Messages from Beyond the Sun. And I'm so happy to have you here with me today. Welcome.
So happy to be here.
Well, actually, as we are recording, this is launch day. This is the day that the book comes into the world. And I can feel this sort of effusive excitement. And I know before we started the interview, you said it's not every day that you launch your first publication. So tell me about it. What's it been like for you on this first day of the launch?
Honestly, the word that comes through is surreal. I had a chance to look at the ebook last night, and just seeing the words kind of splayed out on the page was such a surreal feeling to think about something that really came from my thoughts, from my brain, and transmitted onto paper. And now to be able to see it as something that is going to be consumed by others, it's just I feel so much joy and a lot of pride for this book, not just for my contributions, but for that of the amazing women that we tag teamed and created this with. And I'm just really honored to be part of this amazing project.
Well, we're honored to have you here. I have to tell you, I was reading my chapters last night as I was going to bed. It was my bedtime reading. And of course, I think we're always most critical of our own work, but I was reading it I'm like, this is pretty good. I kind of like this. And then, of course, I'm seeing some things that I wish I would have said differently or whatever as well. But that's part of the creative process, isn't it? That when you are in flow and you're in, we'll call it channel, when things are just flowing out. And then sometimes we don't always go back into the editorial mindset until later. And that is very so typical of creative people, is that we become super critical of our own work. I don't really feel that way. Do you? Apart from
No,
maybe a few things?
yeah, I read the first couple sentences and I felt my editorial brain click on, and then I was like, Not the time nor the place."
It's already done. Well, while this is your first a book, we'll say, you have a PhD in school psychology, so this is not your first rodeo writing. Can you tell us a little bit about your background before you stepped into this space of coaching and working with the intuitive kids?
Of course, yes. So I took a very zigzag approach to getting to where I am here today. I started my career as actually a classroom teacher. So I was teaching middle school English. I always had a passion for education. It was instilled in me from a young age, which I speak about in the book, that education is a gateway to success. And so I always gravitated to working with children. And I thought schools would be a great place to really foster that sense of wonder and creativity. And so in my career, I decided, the classroom was where I was meant to be. I quickly learned that public education is its own beast in its own nature. And so after a year of teaching, I really thought about how I could make more of a significant impact for the kids that I was working with. And that's how I found my way to school psych. I completed my master's degree that enabled me to be a school psychologist, and I worked in public schools for 4 years. And in that time, I got a lot of wonderful, robust, beautiful experience, but I also suffered from burnout. The public education system operates on this indentured servitude paradigm that just completely drained me of my creativity, my flow, my vision for how I wanted to help and support others. And so after a very short-lived career, I was kind of at a crossroads of I either continue down this path for the next 35 plus years or I pivot. And so I speak about this in my chapter about how academia has always been this really safe place for me where I have been able to thrive and fully embrace my intuitive gifts. And so at that juncture, I really had to grapple with what were my next steps. And so I decided to pursue my PhD because at that time it had been communicated to me that was kind of the gateway to have, professional freedom, so to speak. And so that brought me out to Arizona, where I went to the University of Arizona and got my doctorate. And I was able to work in a lot of different clinical settings with kids and families, like hospitals, the legal system, community mental health. And I was almost looking in each setting as like the golden key that I could actually be like, ah, this is it. And unfortunately, with everyone, it was just like running my head into the wall. It was the same kind of problematic system portrayed in different settings. And so I graduated and I went ahead and accepted a postdoc actually back in public schools because I thought maybe this will be like a full circle moment where I can really, feel like, I acquired the knowledge and skills I need to really be able to apply this in my practice in a meaningful way. Spoiler alert, that didn't work out. I lasted all of like 3.5 months before I impulsively, I would say, but very thoughtfully quit my job without anything lined up on the back half. And that was in January of 2023. And so since then, it's been really a beautiful and arduous journey of my own spiritual awakening, my own deep, profound sense of healing, and then how that has been kind of transmuted into my work as a school psychologist and beyond. A few months after I quit my job, I was working in a private practice underneath one of my colleagues, studying for my licensure exam, thinking that this was the golden ticket to operate my own traditional private practice and see clients and do the work, honestly, that was really meaningful to me. And then a series of steps, and I landed in coaching and consulting and decided, I had this realization that I have something different to offer than a modern psychologist, that my lived experiences from the time that I was a very young girl till now directly informs my work. And it's creating this new paradigm of how we're raising these highly sensitive and intuitive kids. And so I really think that this book encapsulates that story and that journey. And really, I'm just so honored to share kind of this new alternative, more holistic approach to treating common mental health symptoms that we're seeing in our kids more than ever before, like anxiety, depression, ADHD, and rather coming from a place of pathologizing them, really coming from a place of empowerment.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. That just, you took us on a journey to begin with, right? Through your own experiences stepping into this project. So, next question for you is pretty simple, which is why did you decide to join the book project to begin with?
Yeah. When I first got offered the invitation to join this project, my initial instinct was like, heck no, I'm not going to do this. But then at the same time, as I kind of sat with it, I thought, I absolutely need to do this. And so the reason behind that is I was actually reflecting on this morning. I never considered myself a very gifted writer. A lot of resistance to pursuing my PhD back when I was in my master's program was fear around producing a dissertation. I didn't think I had the capacity to do it. I had a memory come forward this morning of me sitting in my AP English exam, staring at a blank piece of paper in high school, just sick to my stomach about having to write these like multi-paragraph responses. And so I always just had this notion that I was not a skillful writer. And so I avoided it. And even going through the dissertation process and being very successful in that process, in retrospect, I didn't feel like I had the confidence that I should. And so this was an invitation to explore my writing a little more deeply. And I'm so grateful that I did because there were a lot of things that came through around projections from the past that were showing up in my written expression that I had no conscious awareness of.
I think it's so interesting that you had this fear around and concern around your writing when you were a middle school English teacher. Like,
I know, right?
riddle me this, Batman.
I had to go back and do some reparative work as the teacher.
We always say research is me search. I think that goes too for work sometimes. That's great. So, all right. So, as a result of being on the project and stepping into what we lovingly call book club, I love that.
I love it. Oh, it's lovely.
My intention was not just, of course, to produce another best-selling book so that people could say that they're best-selling authors. That's a dime a dozen. I have always been of the mindset that I want to develop authors. And so Engelheim Press, Book Club writing your channeled book in the process, these were all pieces of the puzzle. So the book itself is actually a touchstone or a capstone experience, I will say, for all the authors who stepped into the project. What did you have to overcome during this process, which lasted about 6 months from beginning to end?
Yeah. I think the way that you structured it was very intentional and very purposeful, which I loved. And I think I needed that level of support throughout the process. Otherwise, if I was doing this in a truly independent fashion, I don't know if the product that I ultimately produced would be the same. The actual writing process, I think with your coaching and guidance allowed me to really allow things to just flow. So, like, again, coming from a strong academic background, everything is very prescriptive and kind of laid out in a very detailed outline. And so, this was really the first time that I was engaging in a project where I was truly writing from a place of flow. So, if it sounded weird, just letting those words kind of fall on the page as they did and not meeting that with any like judgment or criticism, just rather a sense of curiosity. And so the writing part actually was much easier than I initially anticipated, which going back to my previous comment, it's hilarious of sorts. And so I really enjoyed the writing process. I think what really kind of launched me into my own existential, oh my gosh, period was when we were actually talking about publishing the book. That really was like a hard stop for me where I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is actually going to be consumed by others." Because if you think about it, coming from like an academic background, the urge that I felt while writing to provide like in-text citations for what I was writing, like everything in academia is around citing your source. And while I understand the value of that, this project is different through the lens of this is speaking your truth. Nobody can speak your story and your medicine the way that you can. And so being able to relinquish that, but then even more so recognizing that this was going to be read by others because most academic projects, I mean, think about it. Your professor reads it. You might have a peer read it. Even when I was doing like psychological evaluations in private practice, most people aren't reading through those 30 to 50-page documents. They're reading the ending. So I had never really been in an experience where someone was closely reading my work that is truly mine. And so there was a lot of resistance that came forward for me when we were getting closer to the launch date of, fear of judgment, fear of criticism. What are my parents going to think? What are my colleagues going to think? Will I still be viewed as a credible source, and just all of these fears and worries were coming forward around like essentially speaking my truth. And so as I've had to sit with that in preparation for this launch, it really has showed me kind of how these things have been programmed from the time I was very young and how this book has been the vehicle to help me break through those and really champion my own knowledge, my own expertise, and most importantly, my own voice.
I love that transformation from citing your source to speaking your truth. That to me encapsulates what this book project was about. Now, of course, there are times and place to cite your source. And what I've been saying about the book is when we talk about channeled writing or writing in flow or speaking your truth, is that it is perspective. It's not meant to be truth with a capital T. It is simply meant to be from your vantage point, the things that you know for sure. And that's an edge of growth for a lot of people because there's a constant referring back to what will my teacher think or what will my mom think or fill in the blank. So ultimately, how did you, I don't want to say overcome, but how did you navigate that? Like, you're here, the book is published. So how did
Yeah.
you melt that resistance?
Yeah. I think this was just an extension of what I've had to do professionally up until this point. I think when I decided to practice differently than my fellow psychologists, that was the tipping point of kind of this trajectory that I'm on of offering this alternative approach within my field. within our field. And so I think that this is merely an extension of that. And I think, it's a great opportunity. This project allows me kind of another notch in my belt to really position myself as an expert. And really, I think the more kind of like when you're working out, like growing a muscle, it takes reps and it takes consistency. I think same with being able to fully embody who you were always divinely meant to be. It just takes reps and consistency. So I think this is obviously a larger scale project for me, but it is helping me gain confidence to be able to speak and position myself as someone who has real lived experiences, not only from my personal life, but in the book, I actually use case study examples to talk about how I've already been doing this work for years at this point. And so being able to provide that really practical, tangible, citable cases that people can kind of take and use to whatever feels good for them.
Yeah, I thought your use of case studies in your chapter on your medicine was brilliant because it's one thing to talk about things conceptually or the philosophy behind or the principles behind your medicine or what I like to call your multidimensional technology or your healing modality. But it's another thing to bring it to life. And that's where we, as your readers, can put ourselves in your shoes, both in your chapter of origin where you're telling your origin story, you share about, your childhood and how, certain things in your childhood impacted how you viewed the world, the trauma that you experienced and so on, and how that has played out through your life. And then, of course, in your chapter on medicine, bringing forward how you're using your gifts, your academic and clinical credentials and experiences, and then how you are integrating the work of the intuition and your perspective on intuitive kids. So it just is a really cool and meaningful way of bringing everything together. Hey, would you be willing to read for us?
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Thank
would
you.
love to.
What selection are you choosing?
I really feel called to read. At the beginning of the chapter, I wrote an author's note to the readers, and I think that would be a really meaningful contribution to share with you all because this helps frame a little bit about why I chose to write what I did and the just offering some gratitude and thanks to the folks who helped me along the way.
Love it. Whenever you're
Okay,
ready.
awesome. All right, so I'm often asked why I decided to study psychology. I can recall my 17-year-old self sitting in my Psychology 101 lecture during my freshman year of college, scribbling notes onto paper with such urgency one could think they were going to vanish into thin air. Admittedly, I've always possessed a deep curiosity for understanding human behavior, particularly that related to child development. The manner in which we enter this world as fragile infants and develop into complex human beings is nothing short of miraculous. I've had a longstanding curiosity for how our environments can directly or at times indirectly shape our perception of the world around us. For much of my adult life, I've been committed to understanding how to best support children and their families in these ever changing times we move through. And while my psychology training was robust, it was also narrowly focused and often failed to adequately consider the intricate nature of the human condition. By stepping outside the rigid lines of psychology in pursuit of my own healing and transformation, I was able to discover the medicine I share with you in this chapter. I've come to believe that my life's purpose is to offer an alternative approach to better understanding the new generation of children who are coming onto this planet. Rather than pathologizing them with labels or focusing on their deficits, my intention is to deeply understand and amplify their unique gifts. Although the intention for my mission has always been rooted in serving children and adolescents, I could have never anticipated the way my clients have deeply shaped me. When I reflect on my career thus far, I'm confident those kids were divinely guided to me, like a gentle nod from the universe that I was in fact on the right path. In dedication of this chapter, I want to thank my mentors and all the families that entrusted me with loving and caring for their children. Thank you for stepping forward to embrace your children fully. I'm honored to continue this work.
Thank you so much. I think it's a rite of passage for authors to read their work aloud. So I have to ask, what was it like for you to read that aloud for the first time?
Really powerful. I literally felt like some of those sentences and phrases like course through my body. I mean, it is that author's note is truly an encapsulation of my truth and why I'm here doing the work that I'm doing every single day. And that was really documented in this book. So thank you for the opportunity.
I love it. I was reflecting when Smart Girls in the 21st Century came out 10 years ago. We had a launch party at ASU and I read out of the book. I think I read my note to the note to the readers as well. And it had that feeling of like, holy smokes, like I'm doing this. And I felt a little bit awkward, but at the same time, just really just proud of the work that we put into that book. So anyway. Okay, so a couple more questions for you. One is, how are you different as a result of this project?
That's a great question. I mean, I think I echoed this a little bit earlier, but to elaborate more, I think this project has allowed me to, in a very concrete way, to put my medicine or my multidimensional gifts out to the world. She's coming out of the closet, folks. She's out and about now. And so I think that's really exciting because, for the folks who are already in my world, which is just a small but mighty group, they know what I do. But I think this is really my first wide scale project that is disseminating my mission and my medicine to the world and sharing my heart with others. And so I think that obviously is going to transcend in many different ways. I think personally, being able to recognize that I have the capacity to create something like this. I think professionally, again, really positioning myself as an expert for working with highly sensitive and intuitive children and having that confidence to be able to move forward with future projects of this scale or beyond. I don't know if I would quite have felt that way 6 to 8 months ago without going through this author development program.
That's so cool because I think that there's this thing that we hear in transformational coaching a lot. It's who you become in the process. And I was reflecting on that today as well, that I had a conversation with one of my girlfriends yesterday about the book. And I said, if it weren't for the book club, there's no way I would have gotten anything produced this year. There is something so just genuinely important about having a circle of people who we work on a project with. And there's also something very meaningful about having a tangible result to hold in your hand. In the world that we live in with spiritual entrepreneurs, I think that, we look at oftentimes our P&Ls as bottom line, how much money are we making, how many clients are we serving, things like that. This is a horse of a different color. How would you say that the book for you is different from the other outcome measures that you use as a spiritual entrepreneur, business owner?
Yeah, I think the fact that it has that tangible result when you said that, that's very resonant with my experience. That I can open it up and read from it and be like, yes, this makes sense. I think when you're functioning as a spiritual entrepreneur, a lot of it is done in the etheric, so much of it is intangible in many ways. And so not that it's invalid by any means, but it's hard to, from like the human side of my brain, really conceptually understand like, okay, I'm doing this. I think even writing this chapter, so much of the magic that I do in sessions is not written down from a protocol. It's really coming just from my own intuition and gifts. And so this project, with it being tangible in nature, has forced me to think about how I can make my work more tangible in nature, with the idea of being able to bestow or teach others to do the work that I am doing long after I'm gone as well, and building that legacy around it. And so I definitely think that feels different than anything I've done before. And, I'm thinking about how, it's the impermanence of this, it's really something that will live on and on. And that's hard to even put words to in this moment with it being launch day, is that one of the things that has always been a professional goal of mine is to create a legacy. That when my time is up here, that I will have left this world better than I found it. And I think this book is such a critical part of that. And yeah, I feel a lot of emotion just even thinking about it. And so,
Yeah, I was reflecting because as clinicians, I think that when we're taught about legacy, we think about the lives that we've touched, the transformations that have come through, on the other side of the couch as we work with people in our practices. But there's something different about having a book that you can hold in your hands. And I'm really looking forward to the day that the paperback comes out, which will be just not too long in the future before that comes out. So to be able to hold the books in your hands and to be able to point to it and say, I did this thing, changes who we are, I think.
absolutely. I got a hard text of my dissertation that's sitting in my coffee table in the other room, and it just doesn't have quite the same feel for reasons that I had talked about earlier, because those words are mine, but they really aren't. And I think, again, this book truly encapsulates like my truth, my history, my transformation. And I guess to have that as like in a time capsule of sorts, like that this is really just capturing in this moment of time, this year, this past 6 months, which have been pivotal for me. Um, and I look forward to the day that I can look back and read it and, have that perspective of like, yep, we can even, pre-post like where we were then versus where I will be in the future. And I'm just really excited for the things to come.
Thank you so much for joining us. We will pop your social media links in the comments along with the link to purchase the book. And oh, by the way, do you have anything that you are treating your readers to when they buy the book?
Yeah. So with my specialty being with highly sensitive, intuitive kids, one of my services that I offer is a virtual intuitive parenting group, and I'm having a big relaunch at the beginning of the year. And so for anybody who purchases the book, I'm offering first month is free for your membership. So this is a
Ooh.
great opportunity. The online forum that we are launching in January has a ton of resources around raising highly sensitive and intuitive children. There's ebooks on there that are linked to different resources and experts across the field of psychology, mental health, education, sociology, etc. There's different videos that you can watch, and then obviously gaining access to our group calls and our community that run live twice a month. So if that's something that interests you, I could definitely share that information and you can jump in there for a free trial.
I'm assuming that they just have to send you their invoice or something like that and leave a review for the
Yep.
book. And that's always such a gift to us as authors. And I think that, beyond, you know, in the book business, we look at, selling copies and things like that. But really, to me, this is a book that launches connections and introduces really special and very potent healing into the world like yours. So thank you so much for being on the book, Alaina. Thank you for joining us. And we will see everybody in our next episode.
Thank you.